friends, welcome back to Acharya Gurukul. Today's topic is types of loads as per IS 456 2025 draft code. These are the contents for today's discussion. Two types of loads shall be considered in the structural design of concrete structures, namely force loads and deformation loads, which are specified as characteristic loads. Loads that cause more severe effects on concrete structures can be adopted in the design at the discretion of the owner. Special considerations shall be given to the design and detailing of structures that are subjected to stress concentrations and fatigue as applicable arising out of all or a few of them. All loads applicable to the design of concrete structures shall be declared in the design basis report. The force loads and deformation loads are categorized here. For force loads, dead loads, imposed loads, snow loads, earth pressure loads, construction loads, pre-stress loads, wind loads, liquid pressure loads, emission vibration loads, blast loads, and impact loads. All these loads comes under force loads. For under deformation loads, creep, shrinkage, elastic shortening, temperature for ambient air, temperature for fire, earthquake, ground shaking, including tsunamis, and foundation settlement. So these loads comes under deformation loads. Now we'll discuss the discussion of each load. Dead loads shall be considered as specified in IS 875 Part 1 as a downward static force acting on the structure. The unit weight of concrete shall be taken as IS 875 Part 1. So here is a tabular column which is given for unit weight for different concrete with different aggregates. For lightweight aggregate, medium, normal, heavy, and very heavy weight aggregates. So these are the unit weights that are specified in the table given. Imposed loads shall be considered as specified in IS 875 Part 2 for buildings and as specified in the relevant standards for highways and railways bridges, respectively, as a downward force unless modified otherwise by a specified standards. The imposed loads can be reduced up to 50% for the purpose of design. Such reductions shall not be permitted in the design of the following structures. Those are structures related to the garages and places of public assembly and structures on whom the imposed load is 5 kN per meter square or more. Snow load shall be considered as specified in IS 875 Part 4 as a downward force acting on a structure arising from natural snow acting on it. Earth pressure loads shall be considered as specified in IS 875 Part 5 for static actions and in IS 1893 Part 1 to 11 for dynamic actions arising from the effects of earthquake ground shaking as vertical and horizontal forces acting on the structure. Pre-stressed loads in pre-stressed steel shall be considered as a concentrated force applied. Pre-stressed force, the pre-stressed steel shall be considered as a concentrated force applied at the location where the strands are anchored on a member being pre-stressed. When doing so, both short-term and long-term losses in pre-stressed force shall be considered. Bill loads shall be considered as specified in IS 875 Part 3 as force applied normal to the surface of the structure arising from natural wind acting on it. It shall be considered along such directions which produces the worst effect of the structure. The wind load calculation procedure with an example is given in the below link, YouTube link. You can watch the YouTube video here. Liquid pressure load shall be considered as specified in IS 875 Part 5 as a force applied normal to the structure of the structure arising from water or any other fluid acting on it statically or dynamically as applicable either from within or outside of the structure. Blast load shall be considered as specified in IS 4991 as a force imposed onto the structure arising from the detonation above the ground, on the ground, and under the ground as the consequent oscillations of the ground arising from it. The blast load calculation procedure is given in the below link. Impact load shall be considered as specified in IS 875 Part 5 as a force applied in the direction of the impact on the structure arising from man-made actions of collision or sudden braking of a vehicle moving either on land or water, or crane moving on gantry inside the structure and projectile impinging on it. Mission vibrations shall be considered as specified in IS 875 Part 5 as concentrated forces applied at the location of the anchors of the missions, such that the worst effect is accounted for on the structure. The load arising from mission vibrations shall be considered as equivalent static analysis, that is 1.5 times the peak load. For dynamic analysis, the actual temporal history of the vibration loads have to consider. Construction load shall be considered as specified in IS 875 Part 2 as a force applied onto the structure during the construction stage, including considerations in design for the unfinished state of the structure, the distinctly different early age properties of concrete, the temporary nature of some load, the sequence of construction in multi-story buildings. Next, we'll discuss about the deformation loads. Under deformation loads, creep shall be considered as a time-dependent strain induced in the members of concrete structures. For shrinkage, it shall be considered as a time-dependent strain induced in the members of the concrete structures. Elastic shortening shall be considered as an axial compressive strain which arises in the members of the concrete structures from axial compression. Under that, pre-stressed concrete members estimated on the adjoining members that are cast in situ within them. For vertical members of buildings that are 100 meters or more tall imposed as displacement on all adjacent members. Temperature, under temperature, there are two deformation loads. One is ambient air and the other one is fire. The temperature for ambient air effects shall be considered as specified in IS 875 Part 5. The elongation, contraction, and bending of the members subjected to differential or total increase in temperatures shall be estimated. The effects of these member deformations on stress resultants of adjoining members shall be estimated through structural analysis and considered in structural design. Shortening of members of the supporting structure and their flexibility are the basis of structural analysis. The second temperature load is fire. These temperature effects shall be considered as strain imposed on the members. The perspective requirements, the prescriptive requirements of fire protection shall be met with. In the absence of this compliance, the effects of flame imposed on concrete members shall be estimated using time-dependent stress strain curve, considering suitably in nonlinear structural analysis. Earthquake ground shaking shall be considered as specified in IS 1893 from Part 1 to Part 11 as a time-dependent displacement imposed load at the base of the structure along the three Cartesian coordinate directions. The foundation settlements shall be considered as specified in IS 1904 as flexibility of the soil and time-dependent soil consolidation related settlements in the stability calculations and safety-related structural analysis. The settlement of foundations need not be considered when the total instantaneous and time-dependent settlements do not exceed the permissible values. What are the design loads? The force loads and the deformation loads shall be considered as characteristic force loads and deformation loads respectively. In the design of concrete structures, the design loads LD shall be considered as LD is equal to LC, that is the characteristic load, multiplied with gamma L, where gamma L is the partial safety factor appropriate for the load type and the design criteria being considered. Partial safety factor for loads. The partial safety factors for different design loads shall be specified for 5 design criteria. So these 5 design criteria are already explained in the previous video, where the consequences of the structure is considered to be more serious under the action of certain design load than those considered in the standard through gamma L. Higher value of gamma L may be adopted in the design of the structure. Now we'll see what are the load combinations. 3 minimum sets of load combinations shall be considered in IS 456/2025 draft code. Each of these loads shall be combined with the other loads such that their worst effect on the structure is accounted for. On IS 456/2025 draft code, the load combinations are set in 3 categories. For set 1, basic load combinations. Set 2, accidental load combinations. Under accidental load combinations, blast, fire loads will come. For set 3, extreme load combinations. So under these extreme load combinations, earthquake loads will come. A tabular column is given for load combinations for 3 sets of load combinations for various force loads and displacement loads. For basic load combination, if we consider for basic load combinations, dead loads, superimposed loads, snow load, earthquake pressure load, pre-stress load, wind load, liquid pressure load, and machine vibration loads has to consider under force loads. But for deformation loads, creep, shrinkage, elastic shortening, temperature, air, ambient air has to consider under basic combinations. But for accidental load combinations, one has to consider dead load and live load under force loads. In addition to that, blast load, impact load, and construction load has to consider under accidental combinations. For deformation loads, temperature for fire has to consider under accidental combinations. The other loads like earthquake pressure load, pre-stress loads, and liquid pressure loads has to be considered under accidental combinations, but these loads has to be considered where it is applicable. For extreme load combinations, dead load and superimposed loads has to be considered under force loads, and for displacement loads, earthquake shaking and foundation settlement, these loads have to be considered under displacement loads. And the other loads, as I explained, under accidental combinations. Similarly, here also earthquake pressure, pre-stressed, and liquid pressure loads has to be considered where it is applicable under extreme combinations. Thank you. Jai Hind.